Welcome, everyone. My name is Carol Watts, and I'm the Vice President of the League of Women Voters of San Jose, Santa Clara. And we're so pleased tonight to present an impartial look at Proposition 1, which is the only state proposition on the March 5th ballot. You will hear from Martha Beatty and Tom Charon. When it is time for your questions, Vicki Muller-Olvera will ask them for you. As you listen, please enter any questions you have by clicking on Q&A. That's Q ampersand A. If you don't see that on your Zoom screen, click on More and then look for it there. We plan to use chat to send you information, but you can't enter anything in chat tonight. Vicki Muller-Olvera has been a member since 2018, and she's active on the LWV California Healthcare Committee and also on our Pros and Cons Committee. Tom Charon has been a member of our league for about a year, and we're so happy that he has chosen to work on our Pros and Cons project. He is a resident of Milpitas. Martha Beatty is a member of our board and has chaired our Pros and Cons Committee for several years. She has also served as president and treasurer of our league, not at the same time, and she is the legislative analyst for LWV California in the area of governmental legislation. Martha, over to you.
Okay, Carol, thank you. Welcome to everyone who's here. We really hope that you get a lot out of this. This is not a simple measure to understand, and so we're going to be going through it in hopefully a little bit of detail for you and bring a little bit of clarity. So we'll get on with it. Okay. Now the league, I've got to get my thing. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan political organization for women and men encouraging informed and active participation in government. We never support or oppose political parties or candidates. We have two separate and distinct roles: voter service at public education and at action advocacy. I actually like to say that we have three separate roles. Voter service, which we are doing now, but then there's public education. For example, we might have a panel on water or whatever. Then action is when League studies issues, comes up with abstract statements of our conclusions on where we stand, which we can then use to support or oppose something, and the legislation primarily, or actions of a group such as those that are not following the Brown Act or something like that. But today we're on voter service, and we hope you learn. Next slide. First of all, I want to say that pros and cons is what you're here for to see. And I haven't been able to advance my screen, so you'll just have to bear with me. Here I am. This is something that is really what we do in pros and cons is to look at the facts as we know them, which are not always, as we try and get the best view as we can, and the content and the costing and the pro, then the arguments pro and against. And if we could go to the next slide.
And I'm going to share a little bit about our upcoming election. I think everyone who's joining this evening is probably up to speed on this, but just to be sure that everybody has all the basic election facts, our primary election is March 5th. You need to register by the 20th, so a week from now, in order to receive your ballot in the mail. After the 20th, you can register in person at your vote center. And if you are a no party preference voter, if you're registered as no party preference here in California, as it is, you won't have any of the presidential primaries on your ballot. But you can opt either to, depending on the parties, the party that you want to vote in the primary on, you can either get, I think it's a provisional, no, I forget exactly what it's called, but you can get a ballot. And if you are no party preference, you should have received a little postcard in the mail a couple of weeks ago, even before ballots went out, giving you the option to opt in to vote in a presidential primary for parties that allow you to do that. And then other parties that don't allow you, you can actually register or re-register with that party and then vote. And then you can actually unregister with that party if you want to. The voter information guides, those have gone out by mail. I personally have received mine. Hopefully everyone has received theirs. And Prop 1 is like more than half of that guide because there's a lot of detail to it. And vote by mail ballots were sent out between February 2nd and 5th. Hopefully you've received those too. If you haven't, or even if you have, you can track your ballot as it's coming to you. And once you put it in the mail, as it's going back to the Secretary of State at sccvote.org. And Carol, if you want to share that link in chat. Oh, thank you. I see that that's in there now. You can do that. Today, as we're talking, just so you know, the sources of information that we're using to talk about Prop 1 are the online voter information guide, the League's own statewide pros and cons document that's made at the state level, the Legislative Analyst's Office report, and Vote 411 resources. And Martha's going to talk a little bit more about Vote 411 in a bit. The League also hosts candidate forums. Hopefully everybody is aware of those. There is one more coming up on this Thursday, 7 to 8:30 p.m. That'll be for the State Assembly D26. That is Evan Lowe's current seat, and all the candidates were invited and thankfully all accepted. So all the candidates will be at that forum this Thursday. You can register online at our league's website, which I think, Carol, you're going to share that one. I can't see chat as I'm there. Yeah, thank you. You can register there. You can also watch recordings of the previous candidate forums, of which there have been several there. All right, a word about how to evaluate propositions and measures here in the state. You know, a lot of this is really obvious, but it's worth going over. So be careful and be thoughtful. Initiative laws are hard to change, right? The legislature typically cannot make changes to voter approved initiatives. So they're locked, right? And even if there are unforeseen circumstances, it's not easy for the legislature. It's impossible quite often for the legislature to make any changes. It has to go back to voters to make any changes. So that's one thing to be aware of when you're voting on a ballot measure. Is it good government, right? Is it something that's really focused on making the state actually perform better? Does the measure deal with one issue that can be easily decided with a simple yes or no vote? Or should this really be something that's examined in the legislative arena? Consider the fiscal effects, of course. Does it create its own revenue? Does it earmark or obligate the general fund? And we're going to talk about that with Prop 1 tonight. Be wary of the ads. Be wary of appeals to emotion and unsupported claims. And check facts and claims. Now, a lot of times we list factcheck.org here, but we actually checked in Prop 1. There are no fact checks on Prop 1 this time around. On some of the really controversial issues that have propositions, a lot of times there will be a fact check entry on some of the claims that are being made. Follow the money. Identify who is funding campaigns with Power Search. And Power Search is a website that's run by the state, by the Secretary of State, and you can look up any ballot measure. You can also look up candidates and see who's actually donating money. So it's really important to check that out. And last, but certainly not least, vote your principles. One other quick thing, what state and local offices are on the ballot this March 5th? I'm not going to read through this whole list, but I do want to call out that you can see the second and third bullets are for United States Senator. That's Dianne Feinstein's seat. And so there's a partial unexpired, completing of her term. And then there's the full term. An important thing to call out there is that the winner, assuming that it's the same winner for the partial unexpired term and the full term, which it might not be, but assuming that it is, it's important to know that that senator will actually have seniority over all the other senators that are coming in for the first time through the November election. And that's meaningful in the Senate. And I'm not going to read through the rest of the list, but you can see there's a good number of seats that are up for grabs throughout the county this March. Okay, with that, I'll hand it back to Martha.
Okay, well, here we are to Prop 1, our main subject for the evening. And what Prop 1, the title that's on your ballot, Prop 1 authorizes $6.38 billion in bonds to build mental health treatment facilities for those with mental health and substance use challenges, and provides housing for the homeless. And the question also on the ballot is, should a greater share of County Mental Health Services Act funding be used and new bonds issued to build treatment facilities and housing for people with mental illness and substance use disorders, as well as housing for other homeless individuals?
All right, and so the status quo, right, what we like to call the situation right now, is that each year the counties across the state receive somewhere between $2 and $3.5 billion for mental health services, and that's from a law that was passed in the early 2000s. I think it went into effect in 2004, called the Mental Health Services Act, MHSA. And that funding from the MHSA, from the state, typically represents 30 to 50% of a county's overall behavioral health spend. It's different by county, and it goes up and down year by year. That's why we say 2 to 3.5 billion, because it is based on a 1% tax on income above $1 million, the so-called millionaire tax. And so, of course, that's a highly volatile number that goes up and down year by year, but typically is between $2 to $3.5 billion. Here in Santa Clara County, it also represents about 30 to 50% of the county's behavioral health budget. And currently, under current law, 95% of that money that's collected by the state is sent out to the counties for them to spend with relative flexibility for mental health services and substance abuse treatment for those at risk for mental illness. It's important to note that the current law, MHSA, requires that the money be spent on mental health services. It can be spent for substance abuse treatment if the individual is at risk for mental illness as well. That can include outpatient, crisis prevention, wraparound services, and so on for those with the greatest mental health needs. Let's see. So many homeless suffer mental illness or substance abuse disorders. It's about 44% of California's homeless suffer from either mental illness or substance abuse disorders, or both. and 10,400 of California's homeless are veterans. That's an important detail as well, because the proposition has a specific carve out for housing for homeless veterans.
Okay, I think it's on to the proposal. And you'll notice that that's really chock full. I couldn't find a way to pare it down anymore because there's so much about this that we need to know. And what this does is authorize bonds of $6.4 billion for treatment facilities. That's $4.4 billion, and to build and renovate housing for those with mental health or substance abuse disorders, about $1 billion, and permanent supportive housing for homeless or at-risk veterans, another $1 billion. And it also shifts about 140 million from the counties to the state to use. We believe this is really hard to track down, but it seems to be going to be used for training of new county mental health workers that are needed for the treatment facilities that will be built, and for prevention activities. And it also specifies county funding from flexible choice community-based treatment to 35% would go to full service partnerships. These are, for example, assertive community treatment, wraparound services, employment services for individuals that are severely mentally ill. And 30% goes for housing intervention, including substance use for rent and family housing for children and youth. About half for housing, half goes to house people who are chronically homeless. And 5% on prevention, not individual treatment of population-based, mental health-based substance abuse disorder, including suicide and overdose prevention. And then the remaining 30% goes to behavioral health services and supports, which include those services for people that are generally less severely mentally ill at this point. And half of that is supposed to go to early intervention, and then also services focused on specific age group. Capital facilities, prudent reserves are part of that too. And this all other category would include the current outpatient treatment, crisis response treatment for substance abusers. But the bulk is to go to early intervention programs. And just a word on that. And Tom, I don't know if this is also something you'll be saying on as far as the cost implications are concerned. But Los Angeles County's Behavioral Health Department has estimated that the proportion of the money it currently receives from the millionaire's tax will likely be slashed from 32% to 18%. But California's Budget and Policy Center, and I know you have a slide on that, so I'm not going to say, well, I don't know about this. 3% goes to the Department of Healthcare Access and Information for the Behavioral Health Workforce Initiative, and then 4% would go to the prevention services. And I believe we didn't say that it's really important to know that counties don't just get money from the MHSA, but they get 10 to 13 billion dollars from statewide and federal money for mental health and drug abuse treatment. So that comes from this. That's in addition to the to what they get from the millionaire's tax. Okay, Tom. The estimated cost. Has he faded away? Tom, it's your turn. I think he's faded. Well, let me go ahead and estimated cost. Ooh, we have a problem here, huh?
I'm back.
Okay, all right.
Sorry about that.
Okay, estimated cost is where we are, Tom.
Yeah, give me one moment. You know, Murphy's Law
Okay,
that the and
well, I could go ahead and start on that. The bond repayment, $310 million annually will to be repay the bond from the general fund over 30 years. And the total cost then goes from the 6.38 billion, but also several more billion depending on the interest rate. Um, and this is a very small percentage of the general fund. It doesn't sound like it, but it is. Um, are we on? I'm getting a lot of static.
I'm back, and I don't know if I'm causing that trouble. I'm going to mute.
Okay. All right. So I will go on with my spiel here. Um, so let's see, the bond will pay for about 6,800 treatment beds in new facilities, 6,000 of which will be inpatient. And they could be locked facilities, but that's depending on county decisions, and it's not even written in the text of the bill or of the proposition, and so it's not something that is you must use it on this, because I know there have been a lot of questions about that. And about 4,300 housing units, half for homeless vets. And the bond money would be distributed through project grants for which counties would apply. And the counties would receive about $140 million less. And this would be, it goes, they've been getting 95%, it would go down to 90%. And use a greater percentage for housing and support services and less for community-based treatment services. And local areas would gain grants and loans for new facilities. They would need to pay the maintenance and operating costs, for instance, any more workforce that they need for this.
Okay, I'm back, and I can do the next slide, Martha.
Okay. All right, great.
Thank you for picking up. Okay, so at the county level, so one of the most significant things here in the proposition. So you've got the bond portion of the proposition to support building new housing and treatment beds. Then you have a reduction in the amount of money that's going to the counties by 5%, right? So it's going from the counties getting 95%, the state keeping 5%, to counties getting 90% and the state keeping 10% of that millionaire tax revenue from the earlier law. The other major component here is that the 90% that the counties are getting has new requirements on how it will be spent. And these pie charts go over that. So the left chart there, the one that's sort of more in green colors, that's the status quo. That's the average for counties across the state, how they're spending current MHSA dollars. And I'm going to talk quickly about each of these. So 75% of the spending today is on community services and supports. What that entails, CSS for short, is funds for direct services to individuals with severe mental illness. The basis for the CSS program is the concept of providing whatever it takes to meet the mental health needs of those who are unserved or underserved. The goal is to provide all services and supports for those in need of mental health services and their families. Current law requires that 50% or more of the CSS funding, so half of the 75% you see on your screen, be used for full service partnership programs, FSPs. And then 19% currently is spent on prevention and early intervention. Again, this is an average over the whole state. It does happen to be, these numbers are very similar for Santa Clara County from what we've been able to find out. So prevention and early intervention provides funding for outreach programs for families, providers, and others to recognize early signs of mental illness and to improve early access to services and programs for suicide prevention and to reduce stigma and discrimination. This component emphasizes programs that prevent mental illnesses from becoming severe and disabling. And then that small little sliver there you see of innovation funds, about 5% is spent to provide opportunities to learn something new that has the potential to transform the behavioral health system. And so what Prop 1 would do is it would rename the current law from the Mental Health Services Act to the Behavioral Health Services Act, the BHSA, and it would expand its scope to encompass treatment for substance use disorders. You remember earlier I said that substance use disorders could be treated if the individual was also at risk for mental illness. This takes away that specific requirement, so money can be spent directly on substance use disorders. It would also require that counties change their funding mix without offering any new funds. In fact, it's 5% less, right, as we talked about. So the orange chart on the right, that's what the county by county spending would look like under Prop 1. 35% for full service partnership programs. So that's actually about the same amount as is currently spent. 35% for behavioral health services and supports. And that would support workforce education and training, innovation, early intervention, and capital facilities. A minimum of 51% of these dollars must be directed toward early intervention supports for Californians who are 25 years and younger. And then 30% is spent on housing interventions. So those would support individuals with behavioral health conditions, and counties could use those funds to cover rental subsidies, operating subsidies, family housing, and shared housing. And half of that funding has to go toward housing interventions for those experiencing chronic homelessness. So the bottom line here, there's a lot of different numbers involved in this proposition, but the bottom line is that it would require counties to spend less on non-full service partnership mental health services. So those are things like outpatient services, peer support, crisis hotlines that would very likely lose out, right? It's up to the counties how they're going to accommodate the new requirements, but in general, that's the expectation. And instead use that money on housing interventions. And then it would also allow counties to use the state money to treat substance use disorders even without that mental health diagnosis.
Okay, so we go on to the supporting arguments. You've had a lot of, your head's probably swirling right now. The supporting arguments, the major ones that we found, mainly from the arguments that are in the ballot that you can read again. So, or not, they're not in the ballot itself, but they're in the voter service guide that accompanies it. The Proposition 1 bond will pay for needed housing for those chronically unhoused, including veterans and people with mental health and behavioral health challenges. And the bond will pay for needed construction and rehabilitation of psychiatric and other facilities needed for treatment. And it provides treatment over incarceration. Okay. And then we have some Prop 1 supporters. The ballot signers are California Professional Firefighters, the Veterans Mentor Project, the National Alliance on Mental Illness California, the California Association of Veteran Service Agencies, the California Chamber of Commerce, and Orange County Cops, which is something I know it's sheriff and policemen. And the top contributors at this particular stage, Federated Indians of Graton Rancheria, which is about the largest casino, I guess, in the state. And he really likes to support, the tribe leader who decides decides that he wants to support some measure, usually on each ballot. So, and the Building and Construction Trades Council, and the California Correctional Police Officers Association, the Kaiser Foundation, and the California Association of Hospitals and Health Services. And they have raised a total of $1.7 million in 1,005 contributions as of the 2/8/24 is when I made the last update on this. And this is from PowerCert. This is replacing, we believe, Cal Access, but I'm not quite sure about that. But right now it is for this election at least, and from the Fair Political Practices Commission, which gives more information about the top contributors. So, and I think that Carol's going to put those into the chat for you so that you can have those links if you want to follow the money, as we were suggesting. But this one's pretty easy, as you'll see when we get to the opposing arguments. So, okay.
Yeah, so the opposing arguments are, and of course, these are the official opposing arguments, right? What we're sharing with you are the official, what's in the voter information guide supporting and opposing arguments. So the opposing arguments, that the number of housing units would have a minimal impact on reducing homelessness, that Prop 1 allows forced treatment and locked facilities that are less effective and associated with higher suicide risk. And by reducing funds for community and evidence-based treatment and changing required allocations, it limits local flexibility to respond to mental health needs. And the Proposition 1 opponents, the ballot signers include Mental Health America of California, California Association of Mental Health Peer-Run Organizations, Depression and Bipolar Support Alliance of California, Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones, and Assembly Member Diane B. Dixon. And the top contributors for Prop 1 opposition are John Lee, and there's one contribution of $1,000 in opposition to Prop 1. So you can see there's a very big difference between the funding that the supporters have put together and what the opponents have put together. All right, and I think that covers all of the Prop 1 content. We're going to talk a little bit about Vote 411, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A.
Okay, I just have a couple of things on this. Most of you, or many of you, and Tom didn't know about these because he's so new to the league, but we have been used to relying on Voter's Edge. But we have our state has gone to a new source, which is a nationwide source called Vote 411. As you'll see, it'll be very familiar once you get there and get into that, because you do the same thing of entering your name and your address, and you can then it will come up with your ballot, give you information about the candidate. We're still asking our questions of the candidates, and you will see those. And there is a place to do the check off. I've never done this, but some people do their ballot fill in that way by checking off their candidates and have an actual, that you can do a printout. You can still do that here. So, okay, I think that's all we need to say about that. And if we can go now to the Q&A.
Hello. Can y'all hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we can. Hi, Vicki.
Yeah,
Hi. Hi there. We have a few questions. So coming in from the listeners, the first question is, what is the projected impact of shifting funds from counties' mental health, drug, and alcohol treatment revenues to the state?
I was getting some feedback on that, Vicki. Could you
Do you want me
repeat
to read
that
it again?
question?
I'm sorry. I'll get a little closer to the mic. It says, what is the projected impact of shifting funds from counties' mental health, drug, and alcohol treatment revenues to the state?
What is the impact of that? Well, I mean, the counties are going to lose 5% of their funds. And that, when you said that something about Agnew's on there, I didn't understand that part of the question. What did that say?
Didn't say anything. It's what is the projected impact of shifting funds from counties' mental health, drug, and alcohol treatment to revenues to the state?
Okay, all right. I heard Agnew's in there and thought, wow, that's a long time ago. I can't tell you about that. But yeah, it's going to change them, but we don't know how it's going to. When we do the county, I was in county drug and alcohol mainly up on the higher echelons. I was also in mental health, but I wasn't a higher echelon there. But there's a planning committee, and they will do planning for generally for many more than 1 year out in the future. And what I was looking at today was the planning for a 3-year period for this year, next year, and the year after that. And so they come up with what their priorities are, looking at what's happening now and what they feel is needed. So we don't know quite what they'll do. They'll obviously have to meet and say, well, we can't do it the same proportions and so on that we did before. So we're going to rethink this. And we know we can't spend mental health. Well, now it would be behavioral health. What mental health service? Or anyhow, MHSA. What is it? Anyway, can't spend that pool of money, the millionaire's tax, for some of these things that we were used to spending it on. So we'll have to find other things. But we don't know. I mean, they've been doing some of these things before, as Tom pointed out. They'll probably be about the same amount for the full service partnerships, which is the one that they're trying to stress for the severely mentally ill. But other than that, because there's housing included in this, the housing interventions that they'll have to be budgeting for, that probably means that the community-based treatment is going to be impacted in some way. But they might find funds in one of the other funding sources that they've been using, and we really don't know.
Okay, thank you for that, Martha. So you brought up Agnew, but somebody else did as well. So I'm going to read their question. An attendee asks, is the permanent housing like the Agnew's facility?
Permanent housing. Oh,
yeah. Is the
no.
permanent housing, that's their question. Is it like the Agnew's facility? I thought I'd bring it up because you did.
Okay. No, they wouldn't be talking about that. They would be talking about the housing in the community. I mean, you've seen all sorts of affordable housing projects, I'm sure, in the paper that there's, as they get approved and they advertise them, and the one I remember is on Blossom Hill Road, but there a lot all around the city, and it would be like that they are places for them to live, and it's like apartments or condos, that kind of thing, but they're living there, but they have supportive services within, so they'd have downstairs. It wouldn't just be a lounge, it would be also services for the people that are living there to help them on their way with their mental health and substance abuse problems.
Okay, so like on-site
Right,
wraparound services. Okay,
exactly.
thank you for that. Okay, so one listener asks, I want to learn where the money is coming from and how it will work.
Tom, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. Yeah. So the governor and the proponents have been very clear to say that there's no new taxes related to this, and so that's a technically accurate statement, but of course nothing's free. So in terms of the costs, so there's the pre-existing millionaire tax or tax on income above $1 million of it's a 1% surcharge that's been in effect since 2004. That continues, and that money continues to fund this work here, funding counties, but with those changes that we talked about, particularly in those pie charts. The bond will cost $310 million a year to repay for the next 30 years. That can actually go up or down depending on interest rates. And that money is going to come out of the general fund. So it's going to obligate, it's a new obligation on the general fund. It is a very small portion. It is like less than 0.5% of the general fund per year. But so there's no new revenue raised to cover that. That $310 million every year will have to be, found or pulled from other general fund priorities.
Thank you. Okay, one listener asks, what is the reason to transfer the responsibility for mental health and homelessness intervention from the counties to the state?
What's the reason?
Yeah.
That's the one where it took us an awful long time to try and figure out what they were doing with the money. I mean, it was just very puzzling that it's very unclear in the text of the measure. But the California budget, and don't we have, Tom, another slide on that in the appendix? Maybe, I'm not sure if we have anything that's clearer on that. Seems like we did. But it is, we have heard, I'm at the California Budget and Policy Center, which knows what they're doing. They're quite well established and have more connections than we do. And they're saying that it's going to go to the workforce training, that they'll have a team that's set up to do that. And that would be, and also to prevention. And that's what the additions are. They also have an awful lot of requirements that people are going to have to meet with their programs. And I just noticed all of the evaluation that they're doing, and I thought that's going to take a heck of a lot of time to work those out too. And that would be worked out on the state level. And they have to staff somebody to work out all of these evaluation questions that need to be answered. So I don't know. We're not really quite sure, but that's as much as we can get.
Thank you for that. Yes. So Tom asks, has Santa Clara County expressed an opinion for or against Prop 1?
Tom's freezing again. No, they haven't. I'll just go ahead and answer it. That they haven't. I think it's probably on their next council meeting, but that's not until like February 27th, I think, because Susan Ellenberg came out today. That the chair came out today with a statement in the paper that said that we'd be losing $9 million, and so that probably indicates that they've done some staff work and that we will be seeing that within the next couple of weeks and find out. I've been really surprised that they haven't, made a statement by this time, but they haven't.
Yeah, if I can add to that nothing specific to add about Santa Clara County, but in general, in my reading, the dynamic is that leaders at the state level, like in the legislature and obviously the governor's office, tend to be proponents of Prop 1. City leaders tend to also be proponents of Prop 1. A lot of mayors have come out with favorable statements about it. Counties and county leaders, where these changes are happening in terms of the fund, some funding reduction and the change in the mix, county leaders seem to be the ones who are least pleased about Prop 1.
Thank you for that. Okay, of the writing questions, we had one about counties, so let's just hit it. Cost to county mental health programs and long-term costs, are they doable?
Doable, I wonder what they mean. What are they doable long-term costs? They'd have to cut out something if they can't afford it, if that's what you mean.
Okay, I think that's what they're looking at, is what happens if funding runs out or something. I don't know. I was just hoping that you guys could
Well, they have
understand.
this, I mean, Santa Clara County has, what did we say, over $500 million to spend on the, the overall services, the overall department, personnel and everything, and all the contracts and so on. And so if they have to cut something out, they have to cut something out or cut them down, and so I think that they would still have a department as far as being doable. They would still have some services. Okay.
I think that's what she was going in. Did you have anything to add, Tom?
Again, kind of just a high level summary from everything that I've read so far is that the types of services that may be on the chopping block here are the less acute needs, right? More of the suicide prevention hotlines. There is money for some prevention work under Prop 1, but from what I'm reading, it's, this is really to refocus on the intersection of homelessness and mental illness and substance abuse disorders. And so a lot of the money is being shifted to focus on those things and less on services for people that may not be at risk of homelessness, which tend to be, less acute situations.
See, I wouldn't call that acute, but that's sort of maybe because I worked in the department, but it is a lower severity of mental illness, and so, in that manner, I think it is going after that. But they also want to spend quite a bit on early intervention, and particularly with children. So that would be another focus of it, that they probably wouldn't cut as much, or at least on the basis of the MHSA. So
right. The under 25 years of age and under what Tom was talking about, his little
friends. Exactly.
Okay, thank you for that. Mary asks, why aren't the 10,000 plus veterans supports by veteran services through federal money? I think that's what she said.
Why aren't the what?
Why isn't it federally funded? The 10,000. She's saying the veterans that are on the street, the homeless veterans, the 10,000, whatever many it was, plus veterans. Why aren't those services funded with federal funds? Is what she wants.
I don't think that we're qualified to answer that. I don't mean
that's the question.
I think that they're saying that the state doesn't believe that the feds have done enough for the veterans. That's the only thing I can say. It's not that the feds aren't doing something for them. They do have the whole hospitals, and
there is a lot of federal funding for mental and behavioral health. We mentioned earlier on that the money from the state and from that millionaire tax makes up 30 to 50% of counties' total spending on behavioral health. So there are a lot of federal dollars and maybe other state dollars that are being used by counties, but this is obviously a big chunk of that. Some of that might be from Veterans Affairs. I don't know, but yeah, I think Martha, you said it well. Like essentially, the state is saying we think there's more that should be done for veterans, and we'll fund it.
Yeah,
ourselves.
but they're not. I mean, we're being asked now. I mean, with this new one, we would the millionaire's tax would fund more services, and so for veterans, and actually the housing portion of it, they don't even have to be mentally ill. So that's something that they felt was important to put in there. So obviously the state legislators felt that it was important to spend some more funds on them. So
Okay, and yeah, Norma had almost the same question. So let's talk about the rationale. What is the rationale for expanding the number of administrators? Seems like just an increase in overhead.
I think that might be referring to the 5% funding that the state is going to keep, right? So it's going to go from the state keeping 5% to keeping 10% of that MHSA funding. And as I understand it, Martha, that's what you were talking about earlier. It's not really clear, but it sounds like it's not all going to be on administrators. At least some of that will be used on like workforce development funding and some other areas. Is that right, Martha?
Yeah, no, I think that that's right. And I think that as far as the administrative part that I was talking about with all the evaluation, they just felt that it was very important to try and get all the counties on the same page, I think, so that they want to be able to have procedures to have them, not test them, whatever, not testing, but they are, standards that they need to follow and that they would need to fill out a form that would explain, how they're meeting these standards, type of thing. And that takes a while, and then that would be an administrative type of thing. And I think that I think that that Governor Newsom has said a lot about that he wants to make it a stronger system, that we're not addressing our homeless very well. And they think that if they get this treatment, not incarceration and so on, going, that it would be better to provide better services. And this is part of the oversight that would need to happen for that.
Okay. Michelle has a question. I don't know where we are on time, but do y'all have one more in you?
Sure.
Michelle okay, Michelle has a question. This is an interesting one, so I kind of saved it. Okay. In a KQED forum interview, Sacramento Mayor Dee Steinberg, a supporter of Prop 1 and one of the original MHSA authors, said the allocation of MHSA funds was never intended to be directed to the community level services to the extent that they have been. Rather, it was intended for the seriously mentally ill, inpatient treatment programs, and supportive housing for the mentally ill. If so, why wait 20 years to rectify this misallocation of the funds via Prop 1? And why is this an either-or scenario? There is a need at every point in the treatment spectrum. Why now? Why Prop 1?
I'm not sure that that's a question that we can answer. In looking at the original goals of the MHSA, I can't really agree with what this mayor is saying. It was supposed to be for community level, and Tom, what was the phrase you used? To get them where they're at, or something like that, and do everything it takes to get them to
whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. And that was part of the very original intention of the program. And so I haven't had a chance to listen to that forum. I'm sorry. I probably should have before this, before speaking today, but I didn't. So.
Oh, the forum interview?
Hmm?
Are you talking about the forum, that forum
Yeah,
interview?
the KQED
KQED.
forum, because it should be very good, but you know, that was not part of it, and I would have just said, I'm very surprised at what he's saying. You know, I think that's more my response to that.
Okay, Tom, did you have anything to add to that one?
No.
Okay. The proposition expands the use of funds to substance abusers without mental health diagnosis. How many more people is this? Any estimate?
I don't know that number offhand, right? That people who are have substance abuse disorders but are not also diagnosed as mentally ill, which Prop 1 would allow counties to spend money on treating the substance abuse disorder, even in the absence of a mental illness diagnosis. The question was, how many people is that? I don't know that offhand.
I worked at Drug and Alcohol Services, which was a long time ago. It's been called something. It's been combined with the mental health for many, many years, but I've been retired for many years. I don't know how many we were treated at that time. So not a question that I can answer, and it didn't come up in any of the literature, but that is a good question. So we can try and find that out.
All righty. That's all the questions we have. We had a couple of people would give a few statements, but we don't have to, there's no question mark at the end of it.
Okay, all right.
John says, thank you.
Okay, well, I think we're probably almost at the.
We are. Yeah, we have 1 minute left.
Oh,
okay.
Look at us.
So I just want to say thank you to everybody, and thank you for everyone for coming, and thank you panelists. This is great.
Let me give one more plug. I'm a new member of the league. If you're not a member of the league, please go sign up. Join as a member.
And Carol, did you put that in the chat? Our lwbsjsc.org is our website. And we'd love to have a lot of new members, and very, very happy to have Tom with us.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.